Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. I hope that you all, look at this little thing here going on. I hope that you all are having a good Tuesday so far. For those of you who do not know me, I am Dr. Maisha, and I'm the founder of the Mind Remapping Company. I teach trauma informed communication in organizational spaces, community spaces, and I also do coach certifications in the realm of neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, and timeline therapy. So I do trauma informed coach certifications as well. So I, as you know, if you follow me, if you've listened to my podcast, this is our episode of our live episode of the Black Mind Garden podcast. If you haven't already listened to it or subscribed, I invite you to go find the podcast on your favorite podcast platform and go subscribe, because a lot of these things that I talk about live that can get lost in the feeds, lost in space, will be all inside of the podcast platform, and you can listen to and them over and over again as many times as you want. Take notes, do whatever it is that you want to do. So the Black Mind Garden podcast. If you're listening to this on the back end, of course, then you already know this. If you're listening to this in the podcast, pass it on to a friend. But I, if you follow me, if you come to these lives on a weekly basis, then you already know how much I love talking about communication, especially with our children, and how I love talking about this world of conscious communication inside of the conscious parenting realm. And so I want to talk a little bit about how sometimes we relegate those behaviors. And I'm a Gen X, raised by baby boomers. And so raised by sort of old school parenting ways. And I often talk about that. And so there are certain things that we dare not have done growing up, and they were categorized in certain ways, like talking back, right? Certain things were decidedly talking back, or we couldn't negotiate with our parents. And these are some of the things that I have shifted in my own parenting. And we have to understand that, our parents, a generation or two before us, they were dealing with different circumstances. They were in a different space of survival. They didn't think about the things that we think about. Now, some parents were progressive and they did do that, but many parents, and especially in marginalized communities, in the Black community and in Black and Brown communities, and also communities that are not, I know people listen to me from probably multiple parts from the world. So people from other cultures can relate to this, right? So our parents had different contexts, different filters through which they were parenting us. And so now, as we are, and my generation, the millennials, and those other the generations behind that are picking up new skills for parenting, are parenting through a different lens. And so um, what used to be misbehaving back in the day, we are finding new ways to reframe that. And so when we talk about, and there's still a lot of problematic behaviors, I understand, in our community with children, and it's some of it is a function of resources, the system failing us and our children, and some of it can be um, managed by this approach that I want to share today called the SCORE model. When we talk about, as a family doc, I have always been concerned with getting to the root of disease. And we often talk about, in the integrative medicine community, dis-ease, right? If you break the word in two. And so I've always been very fascinated with that. My undergraduate background is psychology, so I'm always also fascinated with how the mind works. So when I started to bring this work into the realm of parenting, into the realm of how we deal and manage with our children, when I learned this SCORE model a while back, I thought it was just such a great way to look at. And when I learned it, it wasn't in the context of parenting and kids, but I thought, wow, how this is such a great way to look at problem behaviors that occur, or seemingly problem behaviors. Some of them very, rightly so problem, but some of them are seemingly problem, like based on our own filters. So seemingly problem behaviors that show up in our youth. And particularly if you're a parent, if you're an educator, if you're a part of a community organization, this would be a model that you can, begin to apply to get a little bit more to the root. And when we can get a little bit more to the root, then we can start to look at what resources do we need to begin to solve the problem in a more meaningful and sustainable way. So, when we talk about the SCORE model, SCORE is an acronym, and the acronym stands for symptom, which is the S. The C stands for cause. The O stands for outcome. The R stands for resources, and the E stands for effects. So let's sort of move through this acronym. So let's say we have, and I can, maybe utilize my own personal circumstance or situation. Um, eh, so let's say, I have you all know that I have a son. He's rising third grader now, how they grow up so fast. But when let's say my son is communicating with me in a way that would bristle my, bristle my hairs a little bit, right? And in fact, um, I was having a conversation with my son, and he was actually trying to explain something to me. And he's at the stage where we have very engaged conversation, and he's asking me questions, and he's trying to explain certain things to me. And we know that, in his developing brain, he doesn't always have the language to say what he wants to say. So he's explaining something to me. We're in the car, and he's explaining something to me the other day, and I'm not quite getting the communication, right? I'm kind of like, what is he saying? What does he mean? And so I said, okay, I'm not quite understanding what you're saying. So then he tries to, explain it again, and then he gets really frustrated. He's like, right, that's what he does. And he says, forget it, mom, forget it. So of course, you know, I get that as frustration. And also it was like bristly to me, because that's my own trauma response, like that type of response to me. I have my own, experiences, past experiences with that type of behavior from other people. So in recognizing it, what the symptom is, what's the symptom? So the behavior, we often don't think of this, but the behavior is a symptom of something. So last night in particular, my son had a really long day at camp. And, then after his with camp, we went to do our martial arts training. And it was later in the evening, and we're coming home, and I know that he was tired, right? So the behavior was the symptom, but what's the cause? What's the cause? So that's the going to the C. So I'm thinking of, before I respond, let me think through this. Let me think through this acronym here. The symptom was forget it, mom. That's the symptom. Um, what's the cause? Now I know that he's tired, but I could also ask, what's going on? Like, gosh, like that response. What was that response about? And he could say to me, well, I'm frustrated. Well, you're not getting it. I'm frustrated. Right. And so that's sort of the cause. And I'm really keeping it very simple for the purpose, the example, very simple for the purposes, but you could go deeper with this. And so what, like we could say, what's the frustration about? Now the frustration, at one time when he did this, the frustration was that he was more frustrated with himself because he couldn't seem to communicate what he wanted to communicate. In this particular instance, he was just tired, right? And he couldn't get the words out of his mouth. But one time he did that, and I'm like, what's going on? And he's frustrated because he's feeling like his brain is not able to work in the way that he wants to work in that moment. So now The next is the outcome. Well, what would you like to happen? So the outcome is the question, is asking a question. What would you like to happen? What would you like to happen? What would have been the way that I could have asked you that would have helped, or what would you like to have happened in the conversation? And so, we had a discussion about that. And he wants me to be able to get it, to understand what he's saying. And then the R is resources. Okay, well, what are the resources a person needs to be able to achieve the effects, which is E, the effects that they want, right? What are the resources, internal resources, external resources, but particularly internal resources? And so what I asked is, how can I help you communicate this? What resources do you need? And this is all happening in a very short amount of time. How can I help you better, get across what you want to get across? I can ask questions, right? And that's what I'll do is I'll ask questions, and he says that's fine, right? But before he was getting frustrated just around the fact that even me asking questions meant for him that his brain wasn't working or meant something. So we had to also talk about that. Um, with the outcome, like he wants me to get the first time, sometimes we have to have a conversation about that and reframe that. Well, not every time will I get it the first time. So then what are the resources you need? How can I help you, or what do you need in order to be able to communicate? And then look at the effects. So after they've gotten that resource, or they've gotten the help that they need, what is the effect of then that resource? Did it work? Did it not work? So they look at the effects and they determine, did it work? Did it not work? If it didn't work, what other resources do you go back to the R? What other resources do you need? What other help might you need? So this is taking a person thinking through like a way to solve a problem with a kid. And again, I'm speaking in the context of children, but this also is very applicable in grown people. So we could say that um, in a communication with our spouse, or in a communication with our partner, or communication with our direct report, or our manager, our supervisor, if there's a problem that's happening, or behavioral problem, or communication that's not working, you think of that as a symptom, and then you go a little bit deeper. What's the source of that? What is the cause? And how you get to the source is to ask questions. This naming and asking questions is a thing that I am always talking about, but particularly in circumstances when there's a behavior that's not working. Hey, this behavior, this is how it occurred to me, is that was that and your attention, that's not working. Like, what's going on here? That's a lot of what's going on is the question I typically ask. And then that'll sort of elicit what's the deeper source of what's happening, or the deeper cause. And then what would you like to have happened? What is the outcome? Here's what I'd like. Back to the conversation with my son. What I'd like is that you not growl at me when I don't understand something, because what it feels like is that you're attacking me for not understanding what you're saying. And then we could have a conversation about the outcome that we want to see. Now, then we go to the resources. Well, what do you need in order for this outcome to happen? What do you need to understand? What do you need in terms of, you need food? Do you need rest? Do you need me to ask more questions? What do you need? All right, let's try it out. Here are the effects. Did it work? If not. So I wanted to bring this as a model for problem solving inside of communication that's not working, and behavior that's not working, um, in responses or reactions that are not working. And particularly, we can utilize this as parents or as caretakers of children, and to be able to get to, at any age where they're able to communicate, verbally, or like verbally with words, or even non-verbally. Now, if there is a you're working with your child who is pre-verbal or nonverbal, then you may have to sort of take yourself through this score process. And the outcome would be, sort of you you imagining the outcome that you want, but also based on what you know about your person, what could be the outcome they're looking for. And you can ask them, and you can you can have them do some other type of activity that's communicative if they're nonverbal, because we know that words are only 7% of communication. So we can utilize the other 93% to go back and forth to see what is the optimal outcome, and what could be things that could help. The resources, what are things that could help get to that outcome. And then you try it out and look at the effects. If it doesn't work, go back to the R, go back to the resources. So that is a way that you can manage with nonverbal. And like I said, I talk about this in the context of parent to child, of adult to child, but this is also applicable in adult to adult conversation, behavior, reaction spaces. So as you know, this is in a way expanding our listening, because as you know, I always say listening drives our behavior, drives our response. So the score model is a way that we can begin to expand the way we listen, expand our listening, such that we can begin to be more flexible in our responses. All right. So that is the word of the day. And I invite you to take this score model, this symptom, cause, outcome, resources, effects, and as you look at the effects, you compare it to what you want the outcome to be, and then continue to try the behavior and try different resources to help you get to the desired effect, right? The desired effect. So I invite you to practice the score model, practice it with your kids, practice it with your spouse, practice it with the people in your workspace, and really see how this helps to, and it doesn't take long to practice either, how this helps to move through problem spaces and problem behaviors when they come up. All right. Of course, as you know, I invite you to send this, um, to share this episode with another, share this post with another, because we're always dealing with problem spaces. We're always dealing with aberrant communication. And this is a very quick, easy, useful tool that I often teach in the full scale, the full spectrum of my neurolinguistic programming and trauma informed coach trainings. I also teach this in the organizational spaces when I'm teaching trauma informed communication to the organizations, the corporations, and the community partners that I work with. So share this episode, and comment, let me know what you think, and if you've tried it, what questions you have, how did it work for you. And of course, if you're listening to this on the back end, please share this podcast with another. If you haven't subscribed, go check out the Black Mind Garden podcast on your favorite podcast platform. But I ask you to share this with a colleague, a friend, a neighbor, a family member, and let's have the word get out. So with that said, I hope that you all have an amazing rest of the day, an amazing rest of the week, and we will see you next week. I will be going on vacation, and so I will see you on the next episode. All right, take care.